Hi guys, it's Jasmine Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing all the books I hauled in spring. Alright guys, so it has been quite a while since I filmed a sit-down book haul. These are going to be all the books I purchased from December until now. A lot of these books I have talked about before, so I'm going to keep my explanation of the books very, very brief and just kind of tell you my overall thoughts regarding each book. I do have timestamps down below if you're looking for a certain genre. And if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about these books. Alright, so starting off with adult fantasy, first up we have The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. So this is the fairy loot version. Very pretty, as always. And this is following a group of students that are competing to become part of the Alexandrian Society. So I have a full spoiler-free review. I will leave linked in the cards and in the description if you want something a little bit more in-depth. But overall, I very much enjoyed this. I will say this is being hyped as being like a very spicy fantasy book. It's not. Very, very tame. However, it was a really good time. If you want a dark academia fantasy, I would definitely check this one out. Alright, next up is a book that is getting a lot of mixed reviews. And that is Book of Night by Hallie Black. So this is also Fairy Loot edition, super, super pretty, as always. And this is Hallie Black's first jump into like adult fantasy. Personally, I really enjoyed this. I actually hated the Cruel Prince series, and I loved this. And it seems like a lot of people that love the Cruel Prince series aren't liking this very much. But I just love the vibe of this book. Very dark. It's using shadow magic. And I thought it was a really good time. So I'm going to talk about this book a lot more in my May wrap-up. So check that out. But overall, I did enjoy it. And last up, for adult fantasy, we have The City of Dusk, and this is by Tara Sim. So I actually haven't read this yet. This is also Fairy Loot. Beautiful. And this is following a group of people that are each from 4 different houses: life, death, dark, and light. And they're trying to band together to save this city that is being destroyed by the gods. So it sounds really good. It's just really chunky. So I've been kind of intimidated to start it. I will hopefully be reading this at some point in the summer. Let me know if you've read this already and tell me what you think. But I'm very excited to jump into it. Alright, so moving into YA fantasy, I only have 2 books for this. First up, we have Blood Scion, and this is also from Fairy Loot. It's probably the prettiest book I own. This is the naked hardback, and I've heard really good things about this, but I've also heard it's kind of a heavy. So this is following, or it's inspired by child soldiers who go off to war. And apparently this is pretty dark. I have to be in the right mood to pick it up, but I am very much looking forward to reading it. Alright guys, and the last up for YA fantasy, we have An Arrow to the Moon by Emily XR Pan. So I don't know very much about this at all. This was a bonus book for the Fairy Loot YA subscription. I believe this is like a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and I think Cupid might be involved. Could be completely off base. If you read this, please let me know down in the comments below. Why I'm excited to pick it up though, I absolutely love the end pages. They're like this very pretty blue turquoise, and I just really love sprayed end pages on paperbacks. So hopefully I'll be picking this up soon, and we will see. Alright, so for fantasy romance, I only have 1. But that is because I've been really utilizing my Kindle and my Kindle Unlimited. I'm trying not to buy books until after I've already read them. So I did read this on Kindle, but then decided I absolutely loved it, and that is Untainted by Lillian T. James. So this is following a girl that was kidnapped when she was 5 years old, and she was raised by these people that were very different from her. And she's grown up kind of pretending to be like them. But then one day, this female shows up and wants to set her straight. I love this. This was really fun. It was a good fantasy romance. And I feel like I've been reading a lot of duds recently, and this really made me fall back in love with the genre. So it's super short. I think the second book comes out next year, but I highly recommend picking it up. Alright, so the rest of the books on this list are all romance. So I'm going to break it down by forbidden romance, and then motorcycle romance, romantic suspense, and then just a bunch of contemporaries. So starting off, we have Praise by Sara Cate. I've talked about this book before on my channel, but this is following, I believe his name's Emerson, and he starts this club that caters to people's kinks. And then one day, his son's ex-girlfriend like stumbles into his office, and he mistakes her as his new submissive. And then they end up hitting it off, and it was really fun, really spicy. I cannot wait to continue with this series. I'm waiting for the audiobook of Eyes on Me to come out, which is the second book, but oh my goodness, it was just so good. So highly recommend if you haven't read this yet. All right, so this next book I haven't read yet. I'm very excited about it, and it is Lotus by Juniper Hartman. So I'm probably the only person in like the romance booktube community that didn't like Still Beating. I understand it's very beloved. It was just a little too dark for me, but I wanted to try out other Juniper Hartman books, and this one sounded really good. So this is following a little boy who ends up going missing, and then he shows back up 22 years later. So I do plan on reading it this month. I'll probably already have read it by the time this video comes out. So check that out. It should be in my May wrap-up. All right, and next up is actually a Mafia romance. So we have Mafia Mistress, and this is by Mila Finelli. So this is following Francesca and Fausto. So Francesca is this 18-year-old. She's the daughter of someone high up in the Mafia in Canada. And then one day, Fausto shows up at her house, kidnaps her, and wants her to marry his son. Well, Francesca and Fausto end up having a relationship. Really good, super spicy. I love this book. Listen to it on audio format. So good. The guy that does Fausto just did an excellent job. Now, I will say, I love this first book. The second book, I wasn't as crazy about. I don't know. Fausto's whole personality shifted a little bit, but this book by itself, so good. Highly recommend if you're looking for a good Mafia romance. All right, so the next three are all motorcycle romances. So I've talked about this series before on my channel. I have a whole spoiler-free series review. I will leave linked in the cards and in the description. But the Fallen Men series by Giana Darling, my absolute favorite motorcycle romance. First up, we have Welcome to the Dark Side. This is the second book in the series, Daddy Zeus and Lulu. It's age gap. It's glorious. I absolutely adore this book. So good. And then the other one is Inked in Lies, which I believe is the fifth book. And this is step siblings and also friends to lovers. Slow burn. Really good. I love the writing in this one. This was by far my favorite in the entire series. So if you have not read that series yet, definitely check it out. All of the books are absolutely amazing. And next up, we have It Ain't Me Babe by Tillie Cole. So this is much darker than the Fallen Men series. We are following Styx and Salome. Salome grew up in this cult and has been sexually assaulted since she was a child. Just super dark, horrible life. And then you have Styx, who grew up in a motorcycle club. So he's just been around like debauchery and all of like these drugs and terrible things. So they're like complete opposites. And then one day Styx discovers Salome on his grounds and they end up forming a relationship. And it was really good. There are other characters that have other books in this series. I've only read the first one. I really want to read the next two. There's a certain character in this that I need to get his story. So I will hopefully be continuing with this series. It's really good. All right, the next three books on this list are all romantic suspense, and I actually have a full romantic suspense recommendation video that I will leave linked down below. But first up, we have one of my favorites, and that is Violent Delights by Jessica Hawkins. So this is the first in the White Monarch series. It's Spanish cartel. It's so good. I inhaled this series. Like, I read all three books in one weekend. So this is following Natalia, and when she's 5 years old, she sees her mother be murdered, and she believes the murderer is Cristiano, which is her best friend Diego's older brother. So when Natalia points the finger at Cristiano, he ends up escaping and fleeing to another country, and then Diego and Natalia grow up, and their friendship soon blossoms into more of like a romantic relationship. And this lasts until they're in their 20s. Well, when Natalia comes home, she went to like a boarding school for a while, there's a party, and Cristiano returns, and he says that he is not the one that killed her mother, and drama ensues, and it was so good. I cannot recommend this enough. Please, if you like romantic suspense, you will absolutely love this. Highly, highly recommend. And next up is a book that was a pleasant surprise. I was not expecting to like this book nearly as much as I did, and that is Beast on My Heart by Emily McIntire and Salvar Miller. So also romantic suspense. We're following Sloane, who is this detective, and she gets called to this like very creepy isolated island in Maine. And when she gets there, she finds out that these women are being murdered, and there's Latin carvings on their stomachs. So when she first gets there, the first person she meets is Lincoln, and he's like the island's golden boy. He's an ex-Navy SEAL, and he immediately hates Sloane. But they always have this kind of like pull towards each other, even though they can't stand each other. And then we end up finding a little bit more about it. Obviously, their pull turns into like a sexual relationship. A lot of spicy time, written very well. I love the mystery. I will say I did call who like the actual murderer was within the first 10 chapters, but there's like a secondary element of like mystery that goes on towards the end. So highly recommend. I love this book. One of my favorites of 2022. All right, and last up for romantic suspense, we have Juniper Hill. So this is the second book in the Eden series by Devney Chase. The first one being Indigo Ridge. I was not a huge fan of Indigo Ridge. However, a lot of people said the second book is their favorite. I understand why. I loved this story. So this is following Memphis, who's the single mom. She's trying to escape her life in New York City. So she drives across country to the middle of nowhere, completely penniless, with her newborn. And when she gets there, she ends up renting a room from Knox Eden, who is this tattooed, bearded chef who's like really grumpy, keeps to himself, and he's good with babies. I love Knox. Absolute favorite character. So obviously they end up forming a relationship. We find out why Knox is really hesitant to start dating someone who has a child, and we find out a little bit more of what drove Memphis to leave her home. And this was really fun. So if you haven't read this book yet, highly recommend. It was a really good time. All right, so the rest of the books on this list are all contemporary romance. I'm going to try to get through these pretty quickly. First up, we have Every Summer After, and this is by Carley Fortune. I'm going to talk about this more in my May wrap-up, but overall, I really enjoyed this. It's following Sam and Persephone, and when they are 13 years old, they meet at this summer cabin, and then they slowly become best friends over the next 6 years. And that friendship, as they get older, turns into a romance, and then we jump to the future 12 years, and for some reason, they are completely estranged and not talking to each other. So we're trying to figure out what happened that caused this rift, and this was really good. I was very angry at a certain part, but besides that, overall, I very much enjoyed this, and this is the perfect book to read in summer. All right, so next up we have Things We Never Got Over, and this is by Lucy Score. So I actually listened to this via audio and had no idea how chunky this book was until I got my physical copy, but it was really good. So we're following Naomi, and on her wedding day, her twin sister calls her and says she needs help. So Naomi ends up leaving her wedding to go find her twin sister. She finds her at this like small town. Well, she doesn't actually find her, but she finds her 11-year-old niece that she didn't know existed. So now Naomi has to try to survive in this small town where she doesn't know anyone. Everyone hates her twin sister, who she looks exactly like. And then she meets Knox, who owns this barber shop. He's covered in tattoos, and he's super grumpy. And obviously they hit it off. I thought this was so fun. This book had me laughing out loud, which I feel is pretty hard to do with most books. I really enjoyed the humor of this. And overall, it was just a really fun read and also very perfect for summer. All right, so this next book is the reason that I stopped buying books until after I read them. So I try to read books on Kindle first because I actually didn't enjoy this very much. So this is A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tillie Cole. I heard such amazing things about it that I ordered this physical copy, and yeah, wasn't for me. So this is following Poppy and Rune. Rune is from Norway. He comes to Georgia when he's like 4 years old, and he meets Poppy. Instantly, they become best friends. And then they grow up having this romance until Rune has to go back to Norway. He begs Poppy to wait for him, and it works for about, I think, a year, and then she completely just cuts off communication. So then Rune returns and finds out that Poppy has changed, and Rune has changed as well, and it goes from there. I actually very much enjoyed this story, and I was very emotional reading the story. I thought it was written very well. I was very sad through most of it. I thought it handled things very beautifully. Then we got the epilogue. I've never been so mad about an epilogue. The epilogue completely ruined this book for me. So had I not read the epilogue, I probably would have rated this like 4.5 stars, but with the epilogue, it's like under 2. So overall, this book wasn't for me, but I am happy I read it. I really wish that epilogue wasn't in there. Now, a book that is very similar to A Thousand Boy Kisses, but I feel like is done much better, and once again, this is just my personal opinion, is Full Tilt, and this is by Emma Scott. So this is following Casey and Jonah. Casey is this girl, she's in a rock band, she's estranged from her parents, and she doesn't really know what she wants to do with life. And then you have Jonah, who follows this routine to the 9 every single day, and is just trying to live for one purpose. And then one day, Casey gets blackout drunk, Jonah ends up being her limo driver, can't get her into her apartment, so he brings her home. And right away, they just have like instant chemistry. However, Jonah is trying to keep Casey at a distance, and we kind of figure out why that is. So this is their romance. This book was so good. I was like sobbing at the end of this book. I loved it. I do plan on reading the second book. This is part of a duet. I was nervous to start it, but a lot of you have said the second book is just as good as this one. So I might be reading that at the end of May. We will see. But overall, I really enjoyed this story. All right, so the next 2 books are part of a duet. This duet is getting a lot of mixed reviews. Personally, I really enjoyed it. And that is The Confidence of Wildflowers and The Resurrection of Wildflowers by Micalea Smeltzer. So this is age gap. We are following Salem, who's this 18-year-old girl. She's about to graduate high school. She's had the same boyfriend for a really long time. She's working in her mother's shop, and she really doesn't know what she wants to do with the rest of her life after she graduates. Then Thayer moves in next door, and he's this very handsome single father architect, and they hit it off right away. So like I said, I love this. I love Thayer, everything about him. I will say this does have cheating, so if you're sensitive to that, be aware. And then also, I would check trigger warnings. There's a very upsetting scene that happens towards the end of the first book that can definitely be triggering for some people. But overall, I loved Thayer and Salem's romance. Thayer built her a gym in his house at one point. Like, I want that level of devotion. But overall, like I said, if you want a really good age gap, I would check this out. I also have a full age gap recommendation video that I'll leave in the cards and in the description. All right, and last up is my favorite book on this list. It's probably going to be my top read of 2022, and that is No Tomorrow by Carian Cole. So this is following Piper, and when she is on lunch break one day, she sees this guy with long hair playing the guitar in the park with his little dog, and instantly is attracted to him. So she ends up finding out that he's actually homeless, but they still pursue a relationship with each other, and it's really their romance spanning 14 years. So it's a lot. I'm so happy I actually didn't know what this book was about when I jumped into it, but it was so emotional, so hard-hitting. I loved both characters. Everything about this book was great. So I highly recommend picking this up. I know it's a little intimidating. It is really long, but definitely worth it. Alright guys, that is it for my book haul. Please let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of the books I talked about. I said this already, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!